at that local level. That's why we invited them here. One of them is, our esteemed colleague, comrade here at DVC, your professor of economics. Some of you, probably your professor, who built a course in our program, Economic Justice, because we know the structures of inequality that exist in our society, and this course guides us through that. But we also want to, really get their insight on what moved them in and motivated and inspired them to run for office. Now that's the electoral realm. And those of you who've heard us say everything is political. Our whole existence is political. And how can you be historical actors and empower yourselves? And that's what we're here to really begin and have that discussion today and hear from our panelists. And we will go around, we'll ask, we have some prepared questions. Dr. Yogi and I constructed some questions. They will all get the same question. And we'll begin with our first question, and they will introduce themselves. And I just want to briefly say and thank them all. Marisol Rubio, who is a San Ramon City Council member and is running for California District 9 State Senate. And Andrea Sorce, who is running for mayor of Vallejo. Anybody in Vallejo? Anybody in San Ramon? Anybody in District 9? That's a lot of us in here, right? And we also have somebody that the social justice program has hosted in years past, a community organizer who has done a very productive work focusing on formerly incarcerated people. And Tamisha Walker, who I feel like I'm talking to a screen right now, right? I am. But no, Tamisha Walker has come into these spaces and really provided a lot of insight in how to organize, how to build community power. And now she moved and ran for city council in Antioch, and now we'll be hearing from her too. But now we'll begin with our questions and introduction. Now we'll be passing around our sign-in sheet one more time, please. If you signed up already, just pass it on back. Thank you. Your signatures are valuable, and we are filling these spaces.
I want to know your state.
Find your face, Tamisha, so you see your beautiful face. We have a bunch of questions, and again, limited time, but the first couple of questions that you see there, panelists, are general. I'll go ahead and start with number one. What persons, events, or ideas do you think have had the greatest influence, either positive or negative, on your life, and in what way? So we'll go ahead and start with Professor Andrea Sorce.
Oh, okay. All right. I need to talk into this. All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see so many students here. My name is Andrea Sorce. I'm a professor of economics here at DVC, as I mentioned. Currently running for mayor of Vallejo, California in 2 weeks. And this is such a good question, and I think it's really difficult to answer definitively because there are so many things, and I think you all are experiencing this because you're at that point in your life. I think the early adulthood age is when you start to sort of see things differently and get new information that challenges the information that you were given as you were growing up. And so what comes to mind when I see this question is I think about how, when we're growing up, we're taught to trust institutions, we're taught to trust individuals, we're taught to trust people in positions of authority, and we're generally led to believe that systems are fair. And I think every time you move through your life and you see that example of how that system isn't fair, or that person in that position of authority that actually isn't doing the right thing, that it puts those cracks in that facade. And I think for me, a lot of that started when I was in college. It starts with just anything. One of my best friends was diagnosed with cancer. I started working with the Latino community. I grew up in North Carolina. I started working with the Latino community, and my family, I'm Italian. My family had done sort of the stereotypical American dream story, rags to riches, immigrating. And I started realizing that path that my family went on wouldn't have been possible for them if they hadn't been white, and actually really isn't available for a lot of immigrants today. There's a lot more, challenges. And I realized, okay, I have a responsibility to use my position of privilege to try and make sure that those opportunities that I've benefited from are available to other people. But that's sort of the theme, is any point that I've had, any inflection point has kind of been because I've seen something and had that realization. Wait a minute, here's somebody doing the right thing and they're not getting the right outcome. This is a system that isn't fair. This is breaking what I was sort of taught when I was young, and it motivates me to do this work. So I think I'll stop there. I really want to hear from the others. Yeah.
I often think, so thank you, first of all, for joining us today and for having me here. My name is Marisol Rubio again. I'm a San Ramon City Council member, former director and vice president of the Dublin San Ramon Services Water District as well. And I am running for State Senate District 9, which is pretty much all of Contra Costa almost, and part of Alameda County on the South Alameda side, San Leandro, San Lorenzo, Castro Valley, Ashland, and Cherryland. So what brought me here was really something unexpected, because like many of you, I started at a community college. I thought my career, my life, that was directing me to go into the healthcare field. And I started in a community college as a single mom of a brain cancer survivor who was diagnosed as early as 13 months old. She was considered terminally ill. And at that time, I was told to do hospice care for her by her doctors. And I had gone I was 22 at the time, so probably about some of your ages here. And I went against the doctor's better judgment, and I told them, no, thank you. I'm not up for that option. Just give me your top 3 choices. I'm going to go do some research and I'll come back and tell you what we're going to do. And eventually, basically, I chose a chemotherapy that led to my daughter's long-term survival. And she's actually here right in the back. You'll see her standing back there. So for someone who wasn't expected to live more than 6 months to a year at 13 months old, she's survived quite a bit of that, right? But the problems didn't end there. They continued into the education system. And we know that our education system is woefully underfunded. Sadly, even on the federal government, who does most of the funding for disability children who need IEPs and supportive care, only 3% of the budget is going to education. Meanwhile, over 12% of the budget, almost 13%, is going into military. There's something broken in the system when we're investing more in war than we are in the healthcare, in the health and well-being and education of our community. How can we expect, to me, the question was always, how can we expect better outcomes when we don't invest into our communities? And so being a single mom, raising a child with chronic illness and multiple disabilities, I found myself in situations where I couldn't even get access to after-school care for her. So how am I supposed to work after I go to classes all day? I was going to college at the time, working. And, I had to always look for a job that was willing to be flexible with my schedule and what I could do. And obviously that put me in a very precarious situation oftentimes where I barely could make my rent, where food was scarce and I had to ration it out over the course of the week. And so I was living on the fence, and I know what that feels like. I know what that's like. And I was, and you compound that with the fact that my early childhood experiences weren't that easy either. My father was unfortunately physically abusive with my family, including my mom and my sisters and I, and my mother had to leave him and when I was just 5 years old. And so as a single mother, recent immigrant to this country, she didn't really even know English. It's a scary situation. How are you going to raise 3 girls by yourself? And she really only made it because there was a college scholarship opportunity that she overheard, offering free college education for anybody who went into education. And that's how she ended up not only getting her BA, but her master's in education and becoming a teacher for over 30 years in a high needs school district, teaching primarily a Latino population, And so, but those are tremendous sacrifices that not only my mother made, but my sisters and I grew up in an environment where I had my first job at 12 years old. Her teacher's salary was still insufficient, so that I could continue to participate in my basketball activities and travel with my team and do what I wanted to do. And so I think oftentimes the immigrant population is sorely misunderstood. They are hardworking people, very dedicated and committed to really having an opportunity of living that American dream. And so I think, and then seeing the struggles I went through with my daughter, whether it was in healthcare or education or the services available, as mentioned, I started to realize, as was mentioned, that the system is broken and it's working against us. It's working against those who are on the, on the margin, on the fence, and we're not being heard. We're not being listened to. We need to do something. And that's really what brought me to the table, because I looked back, and while I got a degree from Cal in neurobiology, and I could have just gone my merry way and made money and moved on, I looked back and thought to myself, all the things that could have gone wrong. And the fact that it's still happening to a lot of people today. And I felt that there had to be a reason for everything that I've gone through with my daughter. My daughter, who, by the way, when she graduated high school, was told to go into vocational education rather than pursue higher education at a university. And nothing wrong with that, but that's not what she wanted. She wanted to go into psychology. And so despite her, their recommendation, I worked with her 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, working with side by side with her and educating her myself, because she wasn't getting that support at school. And now she's actually at UC Davis, double majoring in psychology and Spanish. The story, my story is your story. And that's the key. It's the fact that if we truly invested in every single child, in you, imagine the things you could accomplish. So that's what brought me to this space. Thank you.
Are we
From Tamisha.
we trying this again? Can y'all hear me? Hello? Yeah? People on Zoom can hear me? People in the room can hear me? Sweet. Thank you for the question. One of the things, there are many.
And you try to tell.
Oh, sorry. Give me a second. I can hear somebody talking. Okay. Can y'all hear me now? Great. So the question was, what person's events or ideas had the greatest influence on me? And when I hear negative or positive, given the fact that I wasn't raised to trust systems. I've been impacted by gun violence, and my family has. I've been incarcerated, I've been homeless, a teen mom, you name it, right? I've had all of those experiences. And through the work that I've gotten to do in movement to create equity and re-enfranchise individuals and communities impacted by incarceration, when I look back, I'm trying to rethink those experiences that we would consider negative experiences as just life experience, right? And so coming to this work was really, it wasn't like a clear choice, right? Because I'm home from incarceration, I'm disenfranchised, I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. And the first thing people say is, I'm gonna enroll in school, right? And so, went to get my GED, enrolled in Contra Costa College. And I think what I started to want to do was balance the system. I'm not a believer that we're going to legislate our way to freedom. I don't think inherently that policies will liberate people, but I do believe that there is a space in democracy where abolition has a role, as well as reform, reframe, and reimagine, right? The people who influenced me the most were just people who were open to wanting to help. And and do something different. And so when individuals came with a vision to create a system of reentry that didn't exist 15 years ago in Contra Costa County and wanted to use the practical knowledge and life experiences of formerly incarcerated, convicted people to do it, I was ready to hop on board because I had to be a part of my own rescue first. The thing that I had to really acknowledge is that the work that we all do is like an uphill battle with bricks in a backpack. It's almost like you get a little bit further, then you have to take a rest because the load is heavy, but then you dodging all of these boulders, but you continue to move forward, right? And so I think for myself, I count all experience as positive, even if it was traumatic, because I had to learn from those experiences. And what I found out when I got into college is I thought, man, I only have a GED. But what I found out is most often I was the smartest person in the room because I had I had street smarts, right? So I could put my practical knowledge with my book knowledge, and it really helped me get through school, which also fed into my activism work because I got to also challenge the frameworks that I was learning within these institutions. Academic institutions can also be a little inherently oppressive, and I know I appreciate everybody, but for anybody who has been in these institutions, you can tell and you can feel it. And so what I decided is I was going to create change no matter where I was, which is why I ran for office in Antioch in 2020, because it was important for me to get from the front line inside to figure out what needs to be torn down and what needs to be replaced. And so I'm grateful for everybody, every experience, and every individual who came into my life.
Thank you all. And it's great to hear.
Oh, you gotta read it.
Okay, all right. And we appreciate you all hanging with us with all, while we're dealing with technology in the space. And, again, just to reaffirm what everybody was saying, what motivates us, what inspires us to do better, to be better, but not just for ourselves. And that's great. That's going to move us on to question number 2 that we have, and we'll go in the same order. Professor Sorce, what are the most pressing social justice issues that you want to address in your community? And what are your short-term and long-term plans for accomplishing those goals?
Yeah, so Vallejo has, on paper, one of the most diverse populations in not just the Bay Area in the country. It's about 25, 25, 25, 25, Black, white, Latino, Asian. And the government is, even when there is representation, the government, it isn't inclusive of the community. We have a government that doesn't have cultural competency, that doesn't understand what equity is, doesn't have a lens. So one of the things that motivated me to run was just wanting to facilitate that culture change, to bring more people to the table, because there's a lot of people who are really disenfranchised and disengaged, because why would I waste my time trying to work in a system where I'm not valued or listened to in any way? Anybody that knows Vallejo, the most pressing social justice issue is the police violence and misconduct. So I could talk about this for probably about 5 hours, but I'll do the Reader's Digest version. The Vallejo Police Department is probably one of the most troubled police departments in the country. We've got an Antioch council member. I think we might be the only police department that is more troubled than Antioch's in the area. The Vallejo Police Department killed 19 people in a decade. It came out that the officers were bending their badges, the tips of their badges, to commemorate each killing and having barbecues to celebrate. And then it came out that they were also destroying evidence in the police killings. They've paid out about, I think it's coming up on $10 million, maybe $13 million in wrongful death claims and excessive force claims. The city got kicked out of its insurance pool because of all the lawsuits on police violence. And then most recently, the State Department of Justice sued the city of Vallejo to compel reforms in something called a consent decree, because it had become clear that the department wouldn't reform itself. The people in power were covering up the misconduct and not addressing it. And, you know, we all remember 2020 was a very different political climate. In 2020, and Vallejo actually, there was a killing during the George Floyd protests in Vallejo, and that still didn't get any change. I worked with some people locally to start up an ACLU chapter. I worked with some of the impacted families because we have a network of impacted families in Vallejo, which is not something that a lot of communities have because there have been so many killings. We started up a local ACLU chapter to try to get attention. They're trying to decertify some of the officers, but the problem is, you know, the pendulum is swinging back, and now we have a police shortage in Vallejo, and there's a lot of concern about safety. There's a lot of concerns about people call the police, they don't get a response. There's sideshows, there's no traffic enforcement, and it feels really, it feels for people like a little bit like anarchy. And so for myself in the work that I'm doing, getting back to addressing the social justice issue, I am being very deliberate about connecting the public safety crisis and the understaffing and the issues currently in Vallejo with the history of the misconduct and the inability of the city to address the misconduct, because who would want to work in that department? You know, we can't attract and retain. And it gets to the point earlier about, okay, you know, if you can't dismantle the system, but you can reform, rebuild, you know, within the system. And that's the angle that I'm taking, is we need to reform and rebuild, because the same communities that were impacted by police violence that don't trust the police are the same communities that are getting impacted by community violence, and that really deserve, they're paying taxes, they deserve to be able to, if they're a victim of crime, have a response that they can trust. And so that's the thing that I'm most concerned with, I think, in Vallejo. And it starts with changing leadership, so we actually have people that are going to reform in good faith and start acknowledging. I mean, the first thing you have to do is just acknowledge the misconduct, which nobody has done, and start to rebuild from there. So that's you know, in the interest of time, I'll stop there. But again, I could probably talk about it for about 5 hours. It's one of the things that's motivating me to get involved, because I was seeing politicians that were completely fine brushing things under the rug and ignoring problems to further their political career and not actually dealing with the reality on the ground. Yeah.
So just for a little continuity, I'll start with the subject of when we talk about crime. I think what we often, our politicians don't talk enough about is preventing crime in the first place.
Yeah.
We know that there are social determinants of poverty and crime. We know that. The studies are out there, but they do nothing about it. They just deal with the Band-Aid sort of approach, and that does not work. And so one of the things that are a top priority for me is to increase access to opportunity. That includes making sure that higher college education is accessible to all, regardless of your current socioeconomic status. So if you can't afford a college, you should still be able to go to college. We as a society benefit from a well-educated society. It's an investment in all of our futures. Also, talking about before and after school programs, expanding that, as I mentioned, that was one of the barriers I had to being able to be consistently employed. This is also important for young people to make sure that their dreams, their goals are fostered and supported. They may not have those resources at home. They don't have the rich parents that are going to be able to, cut them a check and say, hey, here's somebody who can do the job for me and help my child succeed. Whether that's academic or extracurricular activities. I also think it's extremely important to increase the presence of school psychologists and mental health services. Young people are dealing with a lot of stress today, stress that my generation didn't see. The fact that you have access to social media exposes you to so much more than I had to at your age. And so we need to make sure that you have access to support services in a timely manner. That is the biggest problem we have. And so we have to incentivize young people through scholarships and opportunities for them to go into these fields where we are sorely understaffed, and also invest in schools so they can pay them. The other thing is just making sure that fair wages, that it's, as somebody who's worked as a home health care provider can tell you, they're not even paying us a living wage. That's problematic. The minimum wage needs to be a living wage, period. Especially like, for example, I can give specifically in my field that we're saving the state of California $58 billion a year in healthcare expenses, yet they're only spending about 13 billion to cover our salaries. How is that equitable? It's not. They're pocketing the savings. And so then we also need to increase, when we talk about equity, healthcare. Medi-Cal, what has become Medi-Cal and now switching people into this county-based type of healthcare is creating more disparities in healthcare. Some counties do not have sufficient healthcare hospitals. And so people are struggling to get access to healthcare. We need to start looking at systems. We pay more than any other industrialized nation for healthcare. And on 4 out of 5 domains on quality of care, we are failing compared to those other countries. What does that tell us? That this current system doesn't work. And you will hear from, establishment candidates, saying things like, well, we can't afford it. It's going to cost too much money. It is already costing too much money and we're getting nothing for it. So we need to, look at expanding to looking at options for universal healthcare, making sure that people don't have barriers to access to timely, quality healthcare. And the other thing is environmental justice. I mean, how can we ask our kids and people to be their best and do their best when they're living in an environment that makes them sick? It's very, very disconcerting. What you are seeing since 2020 is a series of extreme climate events happening right here in California, whether it's the wildfires to the extreme rainfall and the heat that we had this summer. The global temperature went up 1.7 to 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit globally. We're having wildfires where we never had them before. And to me, I mean, it's sad that we still have legislators taking money from oil because all they care about is winning an election. I won't name names, but you can probably guess who I'm talking about. But, there's people like that are not looking out for you. And that to me is very upsetting because our job as legislators is to protect your future. And then, but I think another way that I want to make sure to support young people is to start to create opportunities in my own office. I have to be a beacon of that vision as well. I want to create opportunities for young people to see themselves in positions of leadership. A lot of people, when we come from limited resources, like myself, we can't see beyond where we live and what's happening. So from early on, we need to start through those programs I was talking about, creating opportunities for young people to see alternatives, to see that there's a path that they can get there. And so, I would say those are and then obviously working with local organizations like Tamisha's and others to try to support them and make sure that we are reaching these goals from the ground up. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, same question, Tanisha.
Sweet. I have the questions in front of me. I think, man, God bless you in Vallejo. It's, yeah, call me anytime. So, when we think about social justice, it's really about, everyone deserving like equity, right? So, equity in our economy, our politics, people's rights, and like opportunities. When I'm thinking about the work as an organizer and being on the ground, some of the things that come to the forefront of me is not the most pressing social issues, because there is a lot, right? And so, we don't really talk enough about the urban displacement to rural suburbia. And it is a big challenge. Over maybe the past 30 years of the foreclosure crisis, forced displacement through raising rents, people who used to live in urban communities that were deeply invested in with social services and nonprofits to meet the needs of those low-income working communities, disenfranchised communities, undocumented communities. Those communities have now been pushed out to rural suburbia, right? And I call it that. I call Antioch that, right? Because it very much feels like the South, and in a lot of ways. And so what I have seen is that the growth in these suburban communities due to urban displacement has increased, right? And so what happened is the government stayed in a small town mindset and didn't grow with the community. Particularly Antioch is not a population of 80,000 people anymore, right? It's a little over 115,000 and a lot more diverse than it used to be 40 to 50 years ago. And challenges come with that. Homelessness is another issue. People being unhoused. People have always been unhoused, and because we have so little job growth, and like lack of economic growth as well as economic dignity, especially for disenfranchised folks and poor folks, it's leading to actually working class people living in their cars, parking at night, showering, leaving, going to work, and living in their vehicles. Like, not everybody living on the streets is suffering from mental health, substance abuse. You have whole families living in vehicles, right? That is a problem that we have to address. We need to think, what is more important, right, for our folks in our community? Obviously, the just transition from extractive economy is something that we're dealing with in Contra Costa County right now, thinking about what does a just transition look like, not just from the fossil fuel industry, but also what is a just transition from the carcerate state, right? And how it doesn't actually benefit us to move closer to safer communities as much as it just extracts more labor from our communities for profit. And we actually continue to invest in these systems of criminalizing individuals without actually showing that it makes communities safe, which is why I don't support Prop 36. And I think that we should be supporting Prop 6, because, slavery by another name is still slavery. And we cannot tell people go into the world and be productive members of society when we won't pay them to be skilled labor in prisons, and we won't hire them as skilled labor when they return home from incarceration. So that is an issue. Obviously, policing is still a challenge around, accountability and transparency. I think coming from Antioch and seeing like the deep roots of racism, even as diverse as the city is now, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I'm in Reno right now. There's a JD Vance is here right now. There's a Trump rally up the street from where I am, right? And so I'm thinking about like, wow, this could very well be Antioch, because there are flags all over my neighborhood, right? And these people use policing and law enforcement to like beat down on communities that they don't feel like deserve there, right? Reverse white flight, push people out of urban communities into rural suburbia. And now we have to deal with those challenges and fight those battles, particularly with law enforcement. And so I think in the short term, it will be policy change, obviously, accountability, oversight as it relates to law enforcement, but also how are we looking at our budgets? How do you know if your city budget is a morally balanced budget? Do you know if your county budget is a morally balanced budget? And when I mean morally balanced, I mean, is your city investing as much or as equal amount of resources in meeting the needs of poor and working families in your city as they are in policing and hyper surveilling those communities, right? What does the budget look like? I know that the Board of Supervisors just voted yesterday for a guaranteed income program in Contra Costa County. What is that gonna look like? Who is that gonna serve? And how will we know the long-term benefits that people are actually climbing out of poverty? But it's up to us to have that like ear to the ground and oversight, asking these, not saying we shouldn't do it, but making sure that the resources reaching the right people to pull people out of poverty for the long term, not just temporarily. And when I think about the long term, as I've been like doing work in this county around incarceration, criminalization, I've been watching what's happening in Richmond. You know, Richmond just had a major win with Chevron, right? But as we're looking at the elections, it is clear that the status quo is trying to take back power. So how do we like leverage our democracy, our body, our ballot, and our buck to make sure that all the things we fight for related to social justice don't go away in the blink of an eye, right? How do we foster belonging in communities, right? This is what I'm thinking, like Antioch, and maybe there are little pockets around Contra Costa, maybe even some in Solano. How do we foster belonging to make sure everybody feels like they have an equal stake or an equitable stake in government, but also like in how our communities are ran? How do we reimagine public safety so that we are not just investing in police, but we're investing in housing, clean air, clean water, violence prevention intervention, nonprofit-based programs that could help our communities? And then how do we just be clear about intolerance? There are just some things that related to social justice that we're gonna just have to say absolutely not to, and be like, be really authoritative about it, and not let people skate by offering empty promises in an election year.
And I think one of the lessons of social justice movements, gains that are made always have to be defended immediately. That's, I think, a lesson that we're learning.
I think I did the audio right.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so question 3. We're professors, so we make it complicated, so this has a lead up. So we say any commitment to social justice which ignores the political as both a facilitator of injustice and as one potential avenue to change seems incomplete. But then social justice issues are often human rights issues and not necessarily political in a partisan way. What connection do you see between social justice movements and mainstream politics? So we'll start with Professor Sorce again.
Yeah, I think the angle that I want to take with this is sometimes the incongruence, especially among activists, between sort of staying true to what you know and believe in and think is right, and having to work within a system that you know is kind of broken and rigged. And I had this conversation. I'm teaching an economics of public issues class right now, and I had this conversation over the past couple of weeks in my class because we're studying inequality right now. We're covering inequality, and students were sort of pushing back and going, well, you know, the critiques are seeming really anti-capitalist, but is the problem capitalism, or is the problem that when the economic system that we have, when it was instituted at a time when only white men of a certain background had power, and thus by the time we got rights for other groups, the system had gotten so corrupted and messed up. You know, if we were to restart now, would it work? We don't know. And I struggled in the class. I kind of just said everybody's going to have to grapple with that, because you have to decide, you know, the system that we have is doing what it was designed to do, and we're kind of stuck with it in many ways. And unfortunately, the system that we're dealing with, whether it be a political system or an economic system, is rooted in power that was built in a time when there was slavery and just people did not have rights. Women didn't have rights. Anybody that wasn't a white man basically didn't have rights. And so now the structures are so entrenched and ingrained that it's hard to tell the difference between, is it the system or is it just the fact that the system had so much of a monopoly, for so long in that context, that now it has just, it's completely irredeemable and unreversible. And so the question that I think we get left with, and hopefully this will make sense, is do we stick true to the social justice movement, the right versus wrong, sort of, it's not right versus left, it's right versus wrong, which I think is what the question's kind of getting at, that the social justice issues are often human rights issues. It's not a partisan thing. It's like, this is just human, decency. Do you stick to that, knowing that all of the decisions are made by people in this political system? Or do you jump in the political system knowing that the incremental change you're going to be able to make isn't going to get anywhere near the truth to your values that you want to see? And I think it comes down to personal preference. I honestly think we need people doing both. So the message that I have to especially the students, I think we need people doing both. I think we need the activists out there calling out the systems, calling out the injustices, knowing that if you're talking about something like abolition, in a practical sense, we're not going to get there anytime soon. Because I mean, look at where we are. You've got Prop 36, you've got people, we're rolling back the progress that we've made on some of these things. But you need that. You need people continuing to call out those issues. And then you also need people trying to work within the system to make those incremental changes and make those reforms. And I think for me, I made an active decision to try to work within the system. And I'm okay with that, jumping in and going, for example, the police department, like I was talking about earlier, going, okay, this is the context we're in, this is the structure we're in, this is the political climate we're in. How can I get in here and try to make this particular situation more just? Is it going to be perfect? No. But if I can make it a little bit more just, I'll be satisfied. And there are going to be people in the activist realm who are going to be unhappy with me because I haven't gotten all of the way there. And maybe it's going to seem like I've compromised, but I think we need both of that at the same time. Otherwise, we're not going to see any gains, or we're going to compromise our values. We almost need like two fronts in the fight. So I think the social justice work and the activism, it's inherently political, and each of us as individuals has to make a decision, our own personal preference. Do we want to try to go into the system and make the system more just incrementally, or do we want to be on the outside calling it out and kind of fighting that good fight where we're less likely to have to compromise on those big things, but knowing that we're gonna kind of always be stuck on the outside? And that's the best I can do now. Talk to me again in 6 months or 12 months and I might have more ideas, but I think my fellow panelists will, because they've been in it. And I kind of want to hear about what it's like to go from outside the system to inside the system, and what those challenges are. No pressure.
Well, I can honestly say, I think that in many ways, like myself and Tamisha, do you want me to call you Council Member Walker Torres? Torres, what?
Yes.
Are you okay? Okay, so
We can't
Torres,
see each other.
do you, Tamisha? I know Tamisha, so I apologize. It's just that sometimes after a while you're like, hey. But what I was going to say is, I think what's really important is that when you're coming from the outside in, you have to be ready to fight, because all the institutional powers that be are going to come in and pretty much encircle you and find every way to stop you. And I have faced quite a few challenges in that direction, whether it's through mainstream media, that is operated by corporate, they're funded by corporations, so they're going to support corporate candidates. It's kind of a joke. The whole thing is backed up by corporations. And so I have actually felt that what I'm doing now is not so much for me as it is that I am leading a charge for the people. And the reality is that I am furious that we have an institution that is working collaboratively to misguide voters. That to me is problematic. You deserve the truth, the facts. And I'm not saying everything that's said is wrong, but there's certainly some things that you can see happening in politics specifically that might be off. I tend to err on the nonprofit side, look to sources that are publicly sourced, funded for information. The other thing is that I think that you know, the mainstream politics is unfortunately stalling progress, because oftentimes these sort of more status quo candidates that are running, they're reliant on this corporate money, whether it's from hospitals, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, oil companies. I mean, it's everything, every single entity that surrounds us. Corporate money is getting in the way. When Citizens United passed, big problem. Now we have PAC money that has pretty names like Committee for a Safe and Healthy California. That's all funded by corporate money, and they're sending out mailers to people, misguiding them and making them think horrible things about other people just to throw good candidates, clean money candidates like myself under the bus to mislead you. It's all intended to mislead you. And it's really, really kind of sad that us as candidates have to go out there and have to explain all of this, you know? So what I've done, I've started to realize, I'm like, well, I'm just going to put the information out and just, you know, link it to other sources, independent sources, you know, like Courage California or what have you. And I tell people, here's the information. Here's everything you need to know. Don't believe me. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I want you to get the information yourself and go to those independent sources and find out for yourself. I think we have to continue to do that, not just during election years, but we have to do that in between election years. Continue to educate the public. How do they find that information when they really need it and want it, and reliable information? And I think the other part is, you know, it was kind of, we have to work smarter, not harder. We have to find ways to work collaboratively as a community to push back against that sort of disinformation and make sure that we're holding people accountable. And I think lastly is that, you know, it was an interesting question because I asked this of two sitting legislators, and I said, how does somebody like myself, who doesn't have, you know, relatively speaking, I don't have power and money, I'm not wealthy. How do I get into your seat? And both of them avoided the answer. They did not answer the question. Instead, they started telling me about how there's so many people in the legislature that have complex backgrounds, and I'm sure that I'll find somebody I can get along with. I was not asking about getting along. I was asking, how do I get through the door and a seat at the table so that I can represent all of us here? So, I mean, yeah.
Wow. Can y'all hear me? Great. Amazing question. I want to start with, you know, thank you, Marisol. You can call me councilwoman, activist, whatever you want to. It's good. Long as it's, you know, respectful. I think because, you know, people out of their mind right now. I guess what I would say is that you know, it's pretty challenging because when movement is messy, right? Movements are messy. Politics is even messier. The thing is, movements are grossly underfunded. And most of the time, people in movement work are like frontline communities, are wounded warriors, right? Like our people who are fighting from a place of being on the ground and in the thick of it, while most of the time our politicians, if they don't have deep roots still in the community, when they get to politics, they become further and further removed from the challenges that we face in the community, right? So when it's always a crazy balance for me, because some of the things I've been telling people lately is, hey, when the other side gets power, they don't say, hey, let's slow down and see what poor people want, right? They just move forward. When we get power, we're like, let's reach across the aisle. We want to bring everybody to the table. You know, how can we create this amazing coalition of everybody? And so we're always trying to figure out like what is the moral balance, and coming into from movement, when I'm still in movement work, by the way, because being in a space as a city council member in my second term, I have found myself organizing in the community, but also organizing inside of this institution that has lied to our communities for so long about red tape. The reality is there is no real red tape. The reality is there are morally bankrupt individuals getting paid lots of money to be in government and slow down the process so that we do not meet the overall needs of our communities. And that's just that's the truth. And so when you're talking about, you know, Marisol, when you say, I'm sure you'll find somebody that you can find common ground with. What they really mean is what values do you have that you are willing to compromise with? What part of your community are you willing to sell out to get one step forward, right? And so when you say it's a fight, I'm in my second term and I'm still fighting. And the challenge is if they constantly have us in the throes of a fight, we can never really slow down, be strategic enough, and meet the outcomes that our communities want, right? And we are not all like powerless here. You know, there's a collective we that exists that is absolutely more powerful than corporations if we use our total experience to make sure that people who are not for us are one-term candidates. November 5th is coming up, and the voter turnout for our county is still grossly low, right? And so what that means is that the power we hold, we're keeping it all to ourselves, right? And so, yes, how do you get resources? How do you be able to say, like, I'm in movement work, I still believe in democracy, but how can we make it more equitable while, again, holding people accountable? And so I think for me, I always say, we're not going to legislate our way to justice. I'm not sure if any overall policy is the silver bullet to what we're going to need for poor working class people and people struggling in our county. But I know absent the collective we stepping up and demanding that these morally bankrupt systems and individuals actually do the right thing or leave, if we don't exercise that will, then we're going to continue to be in this this cycle.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all. So now we wanted to leave some time for some questions from our community and our students here, but we have a question that's going to be a great segue.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll go in the same order, and it's a great segue thinking about our low voter turnout in this county. And we know the age demographic that turns out the least. It's all of us. Right? Well, not me. I'm not in your age demographic, but all of us, right? Ages 18 to 29 have the lowest voter turnout. And then we break it down by race, even less. So that's our time to act. So the next question is, young people's relationship with politics is complex and problematized. They are seen both as the group who disengages politically, as I just mentioned, yet also at the forefront of major political movements out on the street, shutting down the bridges. In an age where social media has become a messy amalgam of political disinformation, as we mentioned from Marisol, it is hard for young people to know what to trust, let alone take anything seriously at all. How can the youth have meaningful engagement with politics?
Yeah, I'll go. You got to vote, first of all. I told my students, I think yesterday, and I'm not kidding. It sounds silly and it's an exaggeration, but I don't care if you write in Mickey Mouse because you hate all the candidates. Vote, because once you become an active voter, they have to listen to you. And we have, if we disengage, then we really don't have a voice. Even if, like I said, even if you have to write and believe me, I have done write-ins. I have done ineligible write-ins where I have not been happy with the candidate, especially the higher up the office goes. I'll do an ineligible write-in because I don't want to vote for them, but I'm always turning my ballot. And I think, you know, I can't speak for everybody in this room. We've got a real situation happening nationally. And a lot of young people are really disillusioned with the quality of the candidates that we have up the chain and the two-party system. And that leads to kind of the question that I had before. Do you protest, vote against the two-party system, knowing your vote's not going to make a difference in the election? Or do you get in with a party and try to make the party incrementally better? I don't know. That's an individual decision that folks are going to have to make. But here's what I will tell you. The poor quality of candidates that we have at the national level for Congress, for US Senate, for state races, those are all the people that filtered up from the local. And it's what my fellow panelists were saying. They get bought early by corporate chevrons and PG&Es. And it's, I mean, we live in refinery corridor over here. So it's those companies. Follow the money. That's the first thing. You can find everybody's filings online locally. It takes a minute to find, but it's in your city. If it's city council, it's on your city's website. Look at who's donating to the candidates, follow the money, and see what you think. Because typically politicians will do the bidding of their donors before they'll do the bidding of the people. So look at who donated to them. And it is a lot easier to do a takedown at the local level than it is at the, let's say, congressional level. Now we have seen it. We've seen some, you know, grassroots congressional candidates take out establishment candidates. It's not impossible, but the money is so big by the time you get to that point. If we can reject the corporate candidates locally early and build a pipeline of better people who aren't beholden, then we have a better pipeline of candidates to start to filter up, as with Marisol running for state senate. Like you get that pipeline of folks. Now we have better candidates that you can get excited about for higher level races. So the most important votes you make, and I'm biased obviously because I'm running locally, it's your local, it's your city council, it's your school board, it's your county supervisors, because those are the folks that if you get the right people in there, that's our pool of candidates to filter up. And that's how we start to begin to break the toxic cycle of big money just controlling, because it's money versus people at the end of the day. Unfortunately, you need money to reach the people. And that's the quandary we're in. So yeah, start local, turn in your ballot no matter what. Don't be afraid. I mean, again, do what you want to do, but I wouldn't be afraid to do an ineligible write-in if I don't like either of the candidates or I'm not happy with somebody. But go to nonprofits, go to Cal Matters, go to KQED, go to Sites Courage, California. Look at the filings themselves. Look at where the money's going. Look at endorsements and question. Just because somebody's got an endorsement from the congressman, what does that mean? That might mean that they have the corporate endorsement of the congressman. So just, you know, critically review things like that and vote locally.
I like that term, critically review. It's very important. And I do agree. I think the more you see, you know, someone just completely entrenched with these establishment candidates, it does matter who's endorsing them. It's saying something about that person and whether they're, you know, selling out or not one way or the other. So if you're just seeing a whole slew of establishment candidates endorsing someone, well, that's probably someone who's not going to do a whole lot for you in the long run, because there's a lot of favors probably happening behind all those endorsements. But I agree, your strongest power immediately right now is vote. The second is talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. Don't leave today and just walk away with the information in your head. Share that with every single person you know, your family, everyone, and help them make an informed decision. And I think that, reach out to local leaders. We love it. I mean, this is why we came into this space. We want to hear from you. We want to support you, at least I know we do. And sometimes I always tell people, don't worry about being persistent. Do it. Sometimes we need to be reminded a few times because there's a lot going on, but never give up. Just keep going. Just keep pushing. And the other thing is, I would say when we're looking at elected officials and trying to decide, should I trust this person as somebody I would want to vote for, is really understand their why. I think that's why this question, the first question today was why. It's extremely important because as Councilwoman Torres Walker mentioned, that they are, the first thing they're going to do is wrap their arms around you and see how they can bring you along to join the club. But the thing is, if your why is strong and grounded, I tell people I have 30 years of struggle behind me and more. But when it's strong like that, there's no way it can be shaken. And that's why it matters. And so, and you just have to have the political courage. A lot of people have asked me, they're like, how come you don't get nervous? Don't you get scared to call out all these elected officials to their face? And I'm like, no. I said, I dealt with the most frightening thing in my life at 22 years old when I thought I was going to lose my daughter. That was the most frightening thing in my life. This seems like a walk in the park next to that, but it's something that I think, it's a moral conviction. It's something that we carry in our heart. I tell people I'll probably skid out of this world, not walk out, because we believe in what we're doing, and you see it in our actions. Like I said, our money, open secrets, great place to go find out where they're getting their money. All you have to do is enter their name. But it matters because the money they take inextricably is going to influence how they vote. So if they're taking money from sources that are counter to your beliefs, you can bet on the fact that at some point or another, they're not going to be able to support you in your initiatives. So keep an eye out for that. I raised over at least $100,000 from individual contributions for my campaign. Just people, regular folks. And that's hard.
Impressive. Yeah.
That's really hard to do, especially because, I don't have the big showy names supporting me. I'm just doing this from the ground up. But I hope, like I said, my experience is, I'm trying to pave a path for you. And my intention is to pass that torch to you and make sure that you can continue to carry that charge for the next generation. Thank you.
That was exciting. Can everybody hear me? So this is what I want to say. I don't think we give young people enough credit. I don't think we give young people enough credit because I have a 17-year-old who can't vote but has opinions on climate, has opinions on the future. All of those things, right? And inherently to him that don't feel right. Means that he's critically thinking about these, even about these social issues, even at an age where he can't vote, right? I don't think young people are the next generation of leaders. I think young people are the now generation of leaders. And that's the language we have to use because it's true, right? One of the things I want to say is like, you don't have to be excited about somebody to vote for them. Like I've never been excited to vote for anybody. I'm gonna just be honest. The excitement don't have to be there, right? It is your values and what they're saying they're bringing to the table. Does it align with those values? And then the job of young people is really to transform the politics in families, right? Because sometimes even, us older people, I guess I could say I'm older now, we might not have, sometimes the same belief system, and it could be a struggle for young people. I will say that we can't keep telling people that they don't feel, that their feelings are not valid. That doesn't work for young folks, right? If we go back to Prop 36, everybody is like, it's gonna be horrible, it's a lie, don't fall for the trap. And really the challenging part is the narrative is a little off, because the other side is definitely validating people's experience. The other side is saying, hey, this is happening to you. And it is. However, what is the question where you like critically think and interrogate the policy and say, is this the solution though? This is what's happening, but is this thing the solution? And I think young people are smart enough to criticize that and say, actually, no. Prop 36 is not the solution. There has to be some other way than going backwards to go forwards. It makes no sense. So trust yourself. I went to a house and knocked on the door. The voter was a young lady. Her parents are undocumented. She's the only voter in the house. All my mailers were in English and Spanish. That young lady chased me down. Her father chased me down and was like, my daughter wants to talk to you. She's getting off work now. I waited around for that young lady, and you know what she said? Thank you for considering my parents. Because they don't speak English and they can't vote, but you thought about them. Right? So, young people are an untapped voting bloc. It's the only group of people who is counted out every election, because the general consensus is that y'all don't vote anyway. Why do we need to communicate to you, to pander to you, to talk about the hopelessness, to talk about the challenges? Young people are going through a lot right now. What is the hope? And so they just say, well, they're not going to vote anyway, so we're just going to go to the people who we know are going to vote. We're not even going to address the issues of people who don't vote. Young people are an untapped voting bloc. You have power. And it goes back to the collective we. How it is your now time, not in the future. Because honestly, with the voting turnout the way it is in Contra Costa County right now, we can't do it without you. And you don't have to vote the way your mama vote, your daddy vote, your auntie vote, your granny vote. You have the right to vote differently if it's out of alignment with your values. And so that's what I have to say. Give young people some credit.
All our panelists, a round of applause. Just raise your hand. Anybody have a question? I'll run over with the mic. We have a few minutes.
Hello, my name's Cody. I don't know how you or how I would phrase it, but or what it would be considered. But as a young person, how could I make a change with all the corporate money, all the corporate greed, all the problems we have? Because I feel as a society, if we didn't have all this PAC money, all this corporate money, all this corporate greed, we would have so much more human advancement. We would have high-speed rail. We would have other human advancements, in our society. How could I make a change, as a young person? Also, my major is criminal international law. How could I make a change, to help society?
You want to answer?
Who wants to take that?
Do you want us all to answer?
You could
Yeah,
both answer.
if you have something after.
Also, can I get a photo with both of you after this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have time for the photo op. You guys can hang out. I know we have another class in a couple minutes, so you're free to go, but if you want to hang out here and talk to folks, we can do that.
So one of the things I'm already doing in my city council, I have internship opportunities that I create is so that young people are like during their summer break. It's completely led by myself and a fellow council member. The city is not helping us do it at all. We're taking out of our own free time to bring young people into the fold and teaching them about local government, how it operates. We call it like a teen council 101, and give you kind of an overview of the operations at the city level. But the other thing is, even in my state senate race right now, I have young people interning for me from high school all the way to college. And, you know, this is a people's grassroots movement. And like Councilmember Torres Walker said, you know, I firmly believe it's the young people that are going to deliver on this. You're the reason you give me hope, frankly, because without you, I don't think I would have the strength to continue on, especially as we were talking about all the counter forces working against us. But it's you actually are inspiring us to do what we do, because you're showing us that your generation sees things much more clearly than ours did at your age. So I would say continue, as mentioned, reach out, to, your local elected officials. Like, you can reach out to me, talk with me afterwards. I'm happy to find opportunities for you and others here where we can plug you in and your interest in how we can foster that. Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Vote for corporate-free candidates. Vote for candidates who don't take corporate money. Push people. I know for years, and I think Marisol, you probably noticed, is that there has been a lot of work to try to do election reform around campaign finance to get corporate money out of our elections. And we need to actually use our body, our ballot, and our buck to support those candidates who don't take corporate dollars, but also support people to move up the ladder who are actually, who can be truly committed to campaign finance reform to get corporate money out of our politics. Those are two of the things that I do now. Is I don't vote for candidates who take corporate money, and I'm a huge supporter of anybody trying to push campaign finance reform, because it's so important. And the only way you're gonna get big corporate money and big oil out of our politics, out of our pockets, right? Is if you show them that their capitalistic greed and their money is a more powerful than us as a people. Because as long as there's a candidate that's willing to take their money to push their corporate interests, we're gonna be asking ourselves the same question in the next 10 years.
Candidate willing to take their money, because they'll pluck someone off the street and give them the money. But if we can change the culture, and I think this is where young people can be really helpful, if we can change the culture so that it's so toxic to take that money, and we can use our voice to get the word out about who has taken that money, hopefully we can create, I mean, for example, in Vallejo, the Vallejo Police Officers Association isn't active in local politics at the moment anymore. I mean, they have a bunch of troll accounts on social media coming after me, but they don't donate to candidates anymore, and they don't donate to PACs anymore, because their reputation is so toxic that they know that if they donated to a candidate, it would actually harm that candidate more than the money that they give. We need to make it the case for Chevron and everybody else. And we do that by, and honestly, that happened in Vallejo because of the activism of young people in 2020. I think the VPOA would still be active in Vallejo politics, donating to my opponent or other candidates, if not for the activism of young people 4 years ago.
Thank you. So we have one. Did you have a hand? One last question.
I'd say, with your talk of taking corporate money, or at least corporate influence out of local government and the local communities, well, how do you plan to fill that gap really, and expand the, always maintain the economic activity within the county. And also, sort of related, do you plan to expand the local governments or expand the reach? I'm not gonna say stronger local governments, because you're clearly trying to pull away from policing as such, but still, do you want to expand local government?
I mean, I think there's kind of two parts of the question. The first one is I think campaigns shouldn't cost as much money as they do. And I think if we could get big money out, I mean, look at how much Kamala Harris has raised. What she raised, like $1 billion. I mean, there's just no need for that. And you know, it takes to run for state senate, it takes $1 million to run for state assembly. It takes, you know, at least several $100,000. Mayor's race, you got to raise $100,000. If you could get big money out, it wouldn't cost that. It wouldn't take that much to win. The reason that those candidates wins because they just blast everybody with mailers and ads and all that and flood the zone. You can run a good, honest grassroots campaigns on a much tighter budget if you're not up against that. The expansion of local government, I actually don't know that I would say expanding local government. I would just say reprioritizing it to actually make it work for the people. There is so much waste. You know, I can only speak for Vallejo, but I've heard it even from the other panelists. You always hear excuses. That's how you can tell who's honest and who's real, is if you just hear them make excuses. We don't have the money for that. We can't do that. That's just the go-to. We're not willing or able. We don't want to do that. That's code for. And I think it's about looking at your budget and going, how do we take this money and actually get it to work for people? Even if it's law enforcement, even if it's like public safety budget, like what we're doing isn't working. Okay, what do we do with this money to actually improve people's public safety? What do we do with the money that we're putting towards homelessness to actually help move the needle on homelessness, which in Vallejo, it's just wasted on a bunch of, you know, pet housing projects for the developers that back the council. I mean, it's just, it all ties in, and it kind of ties into your original question about money. If the developers can't give to the candidates or don't give to the candidates, then the candidates can't get into office and give the developers a sweet deal. And now our money is working better for the people. So yeah, reprioritizing probably would be the better way, would be how I would put it.
Yes, and you know, I have to jump in because we're overtime.
Oh, shoot.
Overtime, but you're
I
all
monopolized
welcome
that question.
to come in up here and speak to our panelists. And
I was
just
trying to
let's give them
mix it
another
up.
round of applause.
I was so used to going
And
first.
yes,
I was like, I
Overturn
don't want to
Citizens
always go
United.
first.
There's a movement nationally.
Yeah, get rid of
to do
Citizens
so.
United.
Oh, that was the worst.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.